Okay, so I just would like to thank everybody for coming out tonight, and I mean digitally. This is our kind of pilot version of doing a Zoom artist talk. So really fabulous because we have the wonderful Bev Pike joining us from Winnipeg, and then of course we have Chantel who's joining me from the other room. So so I'm Amber Andersen, and I'm the director curator at the Estevan Art Gallery Museum. And I will be here tonight just to introduce the two artists and to kind of lead discussion on the works. And after each speaker presents, we will have a question and answer period. So what I would just say to people is there's kind of like a hands up, if you will. If we have a bevy of questions, we'll kind of go doing it that way. So without further ado, I think I'll just start off by doing something that's really important, and that is a land acknowledgement. So do excuse me, because I do have to write things down because I just don't have the ability to memorize big pieces of information. So the Estevan Art Gallery Museum respectfully acknowledges that we are located on Treaty 2 territory, which is a traditional gathering place for the Nakota, Cree, Saulteaux, and Dakota, as well as Treaty 4 territory, the traditional gathering place for the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and formerly Blackfoot. We also acknowledge the traditional homeland of the Métis and honor their contributions whose history, languages, and cultures continue to influence our vibrant community. And because we also have Bev joining us, which is in a different treaty, I thought I would acknowledge that one as well, which is Treaty Number 1, which is the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dene, and Dakota, and is the birthplace of the Métis Nation in the heart of the Métis Nation homeland. So with that being said, we're now just going to jump right in. So I'm going to introduce, we're going to start off with Bev Pike. So the exhibition that we are actually here to talk about tonight is an exhibition called, now, is it grotesque or is it grotesque?
It's grotesque.
Grotesque, okay. So this is an exhibition that's actually been curated by Blair Fornwald and is actually circulated and organized by the Dunlop Art Gallery, part of the Regina Public Library. So Bev Pike is a Winnipeg artist known for gigantic immersive paintings of architectural utopias. Amid climate and pandemic catastrophes, she bases her research on 300-year-old subterranean shell grottos. Pike shows her work in public art galleries across Canada, most recently at the Dunlop Art Gallery in Regina, Museum London in London, and St. Mary's University Art Gallery in Halifax. In addition, she is a recipient of major grants from the Canada Council, Manitoba Arts Council, and Winnipeg Art Council. Pike also creates humorous, provocative, and feminist agony aunt columns in artist books, which are international special collections such as Victoria and Albert Museum, Tate Modern, and others. She has been a guest speaker from coast to coast. And finally, is a longtime community activist. Pike writes evidence-based satire for the Winnipeg Free Press, CBC, as well as other publications. And then a little bit about the show, and then you're gonna take over, Bev. So Pike's passion is about how synesthesia might provoke a memorizing state that could help survive beneath the earth. These bizarre labyrinths, just like a good tango or opera, both Baroque art forms, each have unexpected yet pleasurable twists and turns. So welcome to this exhibition. Welcome, Bev Pike. And I'll just have you talk a bit about this exhibition, about your work.
So thank you, Amber. I'm so thrilled to be here on Zoom and also to have my work in your gallery. It's all very exciting. I wish I could be there, but through the miracle of electricity, we'll Zoom it. So for those of you who don't know my work, I'm mostly known for, I'm going to read a few points here. Two main things: my gigantic paintings, these are 8 feet high by about 20 feet across, and my fierce defense of women's rights. So that's mostly what I'm known for. So to combine those into one question, I often get asked, how is my work feminist? How is your work feminist? Well, it's easy. I have the element of surprise, and that includes humor, that includes large pieces, and includes being female. It's always a surprise to see women's work in art galleries, I'm sad to say. And the link between the element of surprise and the paintings is Baroque. So I'm working from that tradition in a way. And here's a quick summary of the Baroque. Yeah, Amber,
Do you want me to start sharing the slideshow or?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, you just let me know.
I will read these 4 sentences and then cue you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. So the European Baroque is 1630 to 1780, roughly. People debate. It was an era when multimedia art flowered. So what was invented in Europe at that time was opera, was ballet, dressage, tableau vivant, all kinds of huge spectacles came about then. Why? Because partly because women were insisting on fairness. There was the blue stocking movement back then. And it was the prime time for witch burnings in that same era. So the women were being wiped out, mostly because they owned property and were the local herbalists. And so the men in power wanted that money. And men in power were having a big feud over religious territory back then as well, as the Lutheran movement gained ascendancy. So the Catholic Church invented all these huge, gigantic spectacles of sound, lights, moving objects to grab people's attentions. And you'll see them today in rock concerts and political rallies, because as you're involved in a fireworks display, you're not writing a letter to your MP, are you? You're overwhelmed. So that's the same strategy that the princes in the Catholic Church people were using back then. Women were learning to read, they were writing, they invented the novel in that period. And so they were analyzing the unfairness and sharing scholarship about that in this era. This is a slightly different thing, but maybe connected. Male financiers in Holland went absolutely crazy over tulips. It was called Tulip Mania, 1634 to 36, and stock markets around the world crashed, and people would pay a lifetime's worth of money for one tulip bulb. And so in all this, women were plotting feminist revolution over a new drink in Europe called tea. So now you can put the first image on. I wanted to give you that background, and in that, the second one, yeah, okay, the first one, this is from a grotto. It doesn't show the seashells, but it does show the luxuriousness. This grotto is open to sun, and so its design is to be overwhelming, but with plants. So that inspired one of the pieces that's in the Grotesque series that's not in this show, but you can see it on my website. Next picture.
There we go.
This is 1974. I'm in art school. It's my last year, and I'm getting upset with the focus on men. So art school made me partly made me a feminist. All the art history that you still read is male-oriented, including contemporary discourse, and all the profs were male. So I was trying to create a fantasy, and you'll see this theme running through. A fantasy that the art studio was actually a beautiful realm that was healing and made me happy. So what I did was paint several versions of views of that studio on top of each other. So next image, we're going to speed right through 40 years of work. So this is 1980, and I was going through my mother's estate and taking pictures of everything that I had to deal with in her house. And again, I would layer images one on the other. And my fantasy then was to create some kind of dreamlike world that contained beautiful memories or comforting memories. You know, when you're going through a grieving process, you have all kinds of memories, good and bad. So in that stage, I was 27. I was trying to keep her ghost alive. Next one. So that was 1980. This is 1990. So I'm a wee bit happier 10 years later. This is the Boudoir series, and you'll see more of these on my website. I'm just giving you one and a detail. So this is oil glazes using a Renaissance technique, oil glazes on canvas. Lovely to work with that. It's very tactile, and that was the point, but it's also very toxic. So the next slide shows you a detail. So I was also using silver leaf and gold leaf, and what I was trying to represent was the, now I had a really good language for it here. I was possessed with depicting the luxuries of my own internal sensations. So what would be the visual language to use to embody that? That's what I was after in the Boudoir series. What would, if I could externalize these internal sensations, what would they look like? And I came up with this series, 1990, and it showed all over the place. Some of the pieces are in public collections now. So the next slide image is from about 95. It's a bit out of focus. I gave Amber an out of focus image, I think. This is 8 feet high by 20 feet, called Microscopic View of a Broken China. And that stage I was researching memory transfers between people. And there was research at that time showing that people who receive new organs report receiving or experiencing new sensations, different memories, different attitudes that come with those organs. And also there's a name for this, which I don't remember. But if somebody like your grand tells you a story, a dramatic story, something that happened to her, you can then subsequently begin to believe it happened to you. You embody that. So I was looking at fantasy identities in a way with this series. Microscopic Remains is the name of the series. And I'm just giving you one example. And there's a detail that comes next of the rip. So this is actually a rip, accidental rip, but the paper's expensive. So I incorporated it into the theme of, so you're going through someone's estate, you look at that teacup, it's chipped or cracked, but your great grandmother owned it. And so you have memories of it. It's a meaningless piece of junk, but you invest a fantasy into it. So I'm still really fascinated with that. The next piece, we jump ahead another decade. This is called Lunacy. I was being very politically active, and that some of you know takes its toll. So I wanted to make the ugliest painting in the world. And it's about going mad. And that is a fantastical state to be in, where you're not sure of anything, including any part of you. Now, what were my notes about this? This piece imagines that you're floating in some kind of oceanic world, subaquatic environment that's safe. So there's some tentacles and so on in there. The knitted bundles reminded me of viscera, which was a big topic in feminist circles, what to do with female bodies in our work, given the history of pornography. Big topic of discussion, so I did this partly about that. So the sweaters keep turning up in future work, as you'll see. So the next piece is now, there's 2 slides of installations at the School of Art Gallery in Winnipeg here. So that space is a little bit wider and longer than the Estevan Art Gallery. So it could take 2 more pieces. It was the width that made the difference. But what was also very cool, as you'll see in this slide, is the floor is reflective. So you sort of get 2 paintings for one. It's like you're in a spirit world in a way. It's very hallucinogenic. I just love that surprise element of these installations. So there's one more from that show. This was partly a show we put up when the filmmaker Jeff McKay was making a documentary of my work, and you can see that. You can find it on my website and see more of these installations. We did one a day for a week. He wanted all my paintings to be up, so every day we changed the show. So this is part of the series that followed Microscopic Remains, and it is called Hysteria Chronicles, and started out with the lunacy piece and followed with other states of what's the word? It's like when you're not yourself. Anyway, you can read more about the humor that I put into these pieces on my website. So the next is the beginning of the Grotesque series, and I believe it's in your gallery right now.
Yes.
Yes.
Right when you walk into the exhibition space, this is the first, or actually, no, it's actually behind me.
It's behind you.
I'm
Yes.
like, wait a minute. It's actually physically behind me now.
There we are. So Amber, the curator, is inside, entrance to an underground writing academy. A lot of this is based on a grotto in Margate, England. And again, that's something you can look up if you have a few hours to wander through this really neat grotto. There's 4 million seashells all over the walls and all kinds of tunnels. And anyway, it's got an extraordinary history. So you'll see that I'm using still the knitted bundles to indicate human presence. And I thought, what a cool idea that you'd have to live underground, climate disaster and the pandemic. So we have to burrow. What might be really helpful is to have horses down there and just spend the day with a bunch of horses and enjoy that fantasy. So that was 2012 when I made this piece. The next one is the year later. This is Subterranean Day Spa, and here I was trying to create an imaginary enclosure where you could care for yourself, where you could get a manicure, where you could get a massage, just a steam bath, whatever would make you feel, or any of us feel otherworldly and out of the zone. This is what I was creating in the Subterranean Day Spa. Okay, next. This one here, Buried Dance Pavilion. Is this, no, this isn't one you have, no.
This is the one right when you walk into the gallery.
Okay.
If Chantel could turn her head, this is what she would be looking at, so yes.
Okay, Buried Dance Pavilion. So here I'm imagining a room that pivots around you. You're in it and it's dancing. So wouldn't that be interesting? It's not spinning, it's dancing. So a fantasy of an animated space that was comforting and made you happy. Did everything it could to make you happy. That was my fantasy for this space. This is also, I'll tell you, based on a grotto in Bristol that's completely covered in semi-precious crystals. So when the curator opens the door, you fall over because you can't, all you see are sparkles. What I've distilled here are, because it's impossible to paint sparkles, but I can paint the conches and so on that are embedded in the walls. So hoping to have impact without the sparkles. But do look up that one. Next is, that was 2015. This is 2016, Cavernous Sun Parlor, based on 2 separate grottos. So really collaging elements together. This was about creating a space where people in safety could tend. You could tend a garden, tend each other, and there's nothing coming back at you except more tending. So that was the fantasy of this space. It's based on two grottos. One's called Payne's Hill, Painshil, and one's called Justo Grotto in Wales. So I imagine that all of you are going to be looking up grottos just to see. They're so cool. They're just dead cool to experience. Okay, next is, which one? Oh yes, Gazing Pond Chamber, and that date is 2018. Again, these are 8 by 20 feet, and they're gouache on paper. They take a few years to do. If I'm lucky, 1 year, but sometimes 2 years if the architecture is difficult to reconcile the imaginary with the functioning reality of a space, because I don't want it to be sci-fi. I want it to look like it's plausible, that you can walk into it. And you'll notice in the Estevan Art Gallery, we have pink gels on the lights, pink filters on the lights, and that's to increase the element of fantasy as well as safety. Pink does something to human psychology. So this is got a reflective pond. It's all architecture arising from a lake. And I was imagining a nourishing place for people to, you're underground. Keep in mind, this is all underground. You can go there and just think. You can write poetry, you can sit in the pond, you can stare into space. So I wanted a nourishing, comforting, warm, cozy spot, and water helps that move along. Yes, okay, so that's that one. 2 more images. So the last one is,
That.
I didn't give you the last one.
I was gonna say, I don't think I have.
Did I not send it?
I don't think
Oh
so.
dear. Okay, I guess I didn't send it. That was my fault. Well, in one of the grottos I was talking about earlier, the Writing Academy, they actually held seances in there. They probably still do. So if you Google Margate Grotto seance, you'll see a group of women having a telepathic session in there from the 1930s. So that's the image I wanted to end with. There's one more painting since this very last one. I just finished it last year, and it's called Sunken Seance Meeting Hall. And it links to that photo of the Margate seance. These are very spooky, these underground shell grottos, as you can imagine. They're very scary places. Some of them are above ground, some of them aren't. It doesn't matter, it's still very scary. And you just have to imagine a cave that you can't tell where you're going. You can't tell if you're walking on water or rock. There's no clue. Sometimes you hear a bird in there. You're really not sure if other people are around or where they are. So I love that. It's so spooky. It's transformative. So you have to imagine and engage all your senses to make it work. Now, the Sunken Seance Meeting Hall space that I created is a very, I'm going to use cliche terms, muscular and masculine kind of a space architecture. And I turned it into a very decadent space for telepathy. So if you look around, you'll see lots of masculine musculature architecture, but it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to limit your perceptions. You can decorate it with seashells. So that's my presentation. And I look forward to your questions. Okay, thank you.
I will do the stop share here. We'll go back so that we can just have you as a full screen. Do that. Perfect. Do that. So were there any questions? I just am opening up the chat here. Do I see any hands up? If, you know, I could always ask a couple of questions here for you, Bev. What I should say is that for both of the exhibitions, we'll have little brochures for them, which are interviews with both Bev Pike and Chantel. So they give you some insights into the exhibition. So if you do come, if you have the privilege of being in the area and you can actually come see the shows in person, it's a really great thing to kind of look at the work and then kind of grab this guide and get some of the ins and outs of what the artists were thinking, what they were researching. It just gains more access into the work. So I guess one of the things that I might want to ask you is, what's up next? What are you looking at? What's the future hold for you?
I'm working on a new piece called Tristan Crypt. And it's based on some very huge stalactites in a grotto in England, a private grotto. And these stalactites, these are the ones that drip from the ceiling, and these are 7 feet long. These are bigger than we are. So they're very dramatic. They come at you from the ceiling. So that's involved in this Tristan Crypt. And after that, I'm planning on a crystalline forest, all underground, a crystalline forest for forest bathing.
So I think I do have a question here from Connie Chappell. Did you visit each grotto that you painted?
Yes. And I felt very lucky to do that. From the Baroque era, there's only a handful left. There might be some that nobody knows about except the landlord on private property, but the ones that are public, there's only 6 or 8 of them left. So I did get to visit them and get creeped out in every single one. They're beautiful, but it's a cave.
That's wonderful. I think that would give you such insight too. It really kind of explains the, and I mean, I have the privilege of actually sitting in the space. So as she's asking me these things, I'm like, oh yeah. Because that actually does, because you're kind of have that as a reference point when you walk into the exhibition space, you have a sense of these things actually maybe existing somewhere. There's a feeling of authenticity, even though, you know, they're very fantastical at the same time. So I think that experience and that research are actually living in the works.
That's my dream.
And then so from Tracy Peters, she's like, how many more paintings in this series, Bev, do you plan to paint?
That's a good question. I have no idea. I don't feel like I'm winding down on this. And luckily there's a global pandemic, there's a climate emergency, so there's lots of reasons to burrow and lots of things that we could look forward to being underground. So I don't know how many more, depends how long I live, perhaps.
Well, there's such a sense that you really could continue on this forevermore, right? I think it's inexhaustive. I think you could just keep going.
You can do your exercises and listen more.
Do you have a question, Barbara?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know I was included.
That's okay.
Yeah, I'm watching, but I didn't know you could hear me or see my name up. Well, I'm a good friend of Bev's, and I've been a friend since the Alberta College of Art days in 1970. So I know Bev's history as a painter and her history as an activist. And I just thought I would just say how proud I am of all of the work that she's done to support the feminist community and the artistic community in mentoring and being just a delightful and entertaining person all around.
Same to you, Barb.
That's so lovely.
Hi, Bev.
Vic is here as well.
Oh, and same to you, Vic.
Well,
I'm tagging you onto her coattails.
yes.
I'm glad you could join.
Yes, we didn't really know for sure what time it started. So how far are you into your talk?
Just finished.
Oh, okay, well,
So do you want to do it again for us?
It'll be up on
We have
their
recorded
YouTube.
it.
I'm sorry.
We have recorded it, so we will be posting it to the Estevan Art Gallery Museums. We have like a YouTube page.
Mhm.
So we will be getting on that probably tomorrow or early next week. So you will be able to see and hear it if you missed the beginning.
Okay, well, thank you.
Which we did.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're very
And-
welcome.
Looking forward to seeing it.
Were there any other questions? And I mean, honestly, too, if you think of one later, we can actually have like after Chantel does hers and her Q&A session, if someone has more questions for Bev or something pops up, certainly please don't feel that you've missed this window and that you can't ask later on.
Oh,
Thank
very
you.
good, thank you.
Yeah. So, Ruth actually just had a comment where she's like, so she actually is in our community. So she actually helped us install your artwork. She's like, I feel wrapped with the paintings when I stand in front of them. I like the feminist element of it. So it's just a comment.
That's very kind. Thank you.
What I will do just quickly before I introduce Chantel here, and thank you so much, Bev. That was everything you said just brings so much more insight to your work. And I mean, honestly, we get to spend so much time as people who are administrators and work in art galleries. We spend probably sometimes as much time as the artist does with their work when you think about it, because it's like, 40 hours every week for 12 weeks, whatever it is. So this has brought so much more insight to the work. And it just really kind of confirmed some of the things that I had thought about it, but has also brought up some new concepts and some new things to think about. So I really want to thank you so much. It's really been special to have you join us this
Oh,
evening.
how kind.
I mean, if anything good came out of the pandemic, it's this idea of harnessing technologies like these so that we can come together.
Yes, that's brilliant. Thank you.
Yes, and I will say, and this is naughty on my part, I forgot to thank the funders, which, by the way, if we don't have your support, we wouldn't be here. So I just quickly do want to say thank you to Sask Arts, Sask Culture, Sask Lotteries, Community Initiatives Fund, Canadian Heritage, Canada Council for the Arts, and City of Estevan and Tourism Saskatchewan for all of their support to our institution so that we can bring new interesting programming, such as the 2 exhibitions that we are here to talk about tonight. So I'm just going to jump right into your bio here, Chantel, and do a little bit, a bit of your statement, and then you can just start talking about your work. So Chantel Schultz is an artist from the Canadian Prairies, currently based in Saskatchewan on Treaty 4 territory. Schultz graduated from the University of Alberta in 2020 with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Art and Design and a studio focus in sculpture and drawing and/or intermedia. She also holds a Bachelor of Applied Arts in Visual Communications from the Medicine Hat College from 2017. Schultz has completed internships at the Franconia Sculpture Park in Schaefer, Minnesota, USA in 2018, and at Salem Artworks in Salem, New York, USA 2019. And she has been a recipient of TU Edmonton Arts Council's CIP travel grants and received an honorable mention from the International Sculpture Center for Outstanding Student Achievement in Contemporary Sculpture Award 2019. So she does want to note that this project is supported and funded by Sask Arts. And also most recently, and I'm sure that it should be the star of this, is Chantal was my intern. It's not in here, Chantal. Yeah, just kidding. I'm just kidding. But it was lovely to actually have Chantal work here and to get to know her work. So I'm very excited for her to have this opportunity tonight to talk about it. So in a brief statement, she says, in my practice, I aim to develop an intimacy with the materials and forms I engage with, to become sensitive to their temperaments and to share their material vibrancy. Through an interest in an ostensible nature-culture divide, mainly described through sculpture and drawing, I attempt to reconsider the interconnectivity and relativity of these concepts. a call to question what it is permeable and porous through materials and forms that undergo transformations to challenge the barriers that keep the respective binaries in place. So I think I'll kind of stop there because I mean it's a lot to it's a lot to like drink in and think about, and then we can jump into Chantel Schultz, which is her exhibition, which is called "This Loop is Wearing Thin," which I feel we all feel right now. So Chantel.
Thanks for the introduction, Amber, and for the opportunity to show my work in this space and to develop this work in this space, which I'll talk a little bit more about. So I'm just going to begin sharing my slideshow here. Oh, can you enable me to screen share?
Oh, yes. I'm like, yeah, yes. How does one do that? You don't have the, as I'm saying this while everyone's watching me, you don't have the option to do that.
It says host disabled participant screen sharing. I'm not sure.
I might have done that in, okay, advanced sharing options. Multiple participants can share. Try that now.
Works.
Thank God. All right. Crisis averted.
Definitely. Okay. Okay, so this show is called "My Loop is Loop is Wearing Thin." It's an installation of found, constructed, discarded, shrinking, flowing, decomposing sculptural elements set on top of a long custom-built table raised to the height of the chest face, depending on how tall you are, with an accompanying time-lapse video at the far end of the wall, which you can see behind me and in this image here. So I gathered, well, all pieces were constructed over the course of a few months in the back of the gallery here. I gathered materials and objects like kitchen scraps, produce packaging, and other detritus from my day-to-day. So I would bring them into the space and set up these still life compositions. I used a device that captures images at set intervals over a period of time, capturing the transformative qualities of the materials and objects. So some transformations were captured over a day, such as ice melting, while others, like the produce that was decomposing, had to be captured over quite a few weeks. So after documenting all the processes, the objects and materials were left in place to continue their transformations or to reveal the evidence of change, like the stains on the tabletop. And then the table was wheeled just as is right into the space, so not too much was disturbed. The project began initially as a continuation of an installation that I had done prior to the pandemic, with the guiding question, how might we be affecting the materials and objects around us? And in turn, how might they be affecting us? So in this installation, I inoculated a hand that I cast in an agar and glycerin mixture with environmental contaminants. So agar is usually used in like a little petri dish to culture different bacterias. But I had done some research on bioplastics, and it was being used as an alternative to different kinds of mold making materials as something that was environmentally friendly. And yeah, so I had used that as the main material to make the form, and then also to inoculate it with these environmental contaminants. I then documented the changes and created a time-lapse video of the bacterial and fungal growth. This work felt especially pertinent as we entered into the pandemic and became hyper-aware of this potential threat to our body. But this installation relied heavily on the sense of touch. To view the videos, the viewer had to open the cupboard doors using door handles cast in silicone to mimic the texture and appearance of the agar hand that kind of looked like it might also threaten to teem with growth. Then in, what month? Is that February? Yeah, it was still quite cold. I had done these sculptures that were installed in Woodlawn Regional Park as part of the Inside Out exhibition that had been started during the pandemic last year when different galleries were closed down. And so it was kind of offered as a space for people to view artworks in an accessible way. So Amber carried it forward into this year and invited me to participate in it in the winter. So these works began with the same guiding question as This Loop is Wearing Thin. What is our relationship to the materials and environment we interact with daily, and how can we become attuned to their liveliness? The sculptures appear to be cylindrical extractions of the earth itself, kind of mimicked in the background there, mimicking the color and form of the geological formations surrounding them. Upon closer inspection, the forms reveal different inclusions of various organic materials, kitchen scraps, coffee grounds, tea leaves, other biomaterials, and plant matter collected over the past few months that reference the rituals of nourishment and refuse performed inside our homes and our bodies. As the weather changed rapidly, the sculptures underwent transformations, taking on new forms until the materials were no longer had the same shape, and the inclusions began the process of decomposition until they eventually become unrecognizable and provide nourishment for another material body, the earth. So for this installation, touch was clearly not an option like it had been with the cupboard pre-pandemic. So I turned my attention to the other senses, raising the table to the chest face height to engage the sense of smell, taste, and sound. And rather than kind of make the invisible bacterial and fungal growth that is everywhere in our environment, I tried to turn my attention to the liveliness of the everyday items that flow into and out of our possession. So in watching the produce decompose, grow molds, and merge with other material bodies, I was also thinking of the ways our sense of solidity has been challenged, our vulnerability during this time, thinking about what other organisms, bacteria, and materials are part of our bodily ecosystem, and what other systems are we a part of. So the video and the sculptural elements are incomplete without the other. Viewed concurrently, they maximize engagement with the materials and processes. Let's see if this. So documenting these processes over several weeks and condensing. Okay, we'll just have to carry on.
Because they might be lagging just because we're all currently on, me and you are both on Wi-Fi right now. So I think that that's probably
Oh, that's too bad.
taking, I know. But, you know, maybe we can post, if you send the video, maybe we can post that onto like our social media or something, just so people can have access.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So documenting these, well, maybe I can get it. Why it won't let me now. No. Okay, so documenting these processes over several weeks and condensing them into short clips and projecting these microenvironments onto the gallery wall dramatize these transformations. This hopefully allows you to imagine the liveliness of the materials on the table in front of you in the gallery in a way that perhaps you wouldn't without the video, to condense that time and really reveal those dramatic transformations. So on the other side of that, the sculptural element of the installation offers stillness and time to reflect on the processes that become like almost impalpable when viewed at our temporal and physical scale. The image here is one of the sculptural pieces on the table. So it's just rotting produce that was cast in an ecopoxy resin. So it's a non-toxic resin containing biorenewable content, which makes it safe to work with. And also it's still a resin, so it's still going to take a long time to decompose, but does have more biomaterials to speed that process up. So it just kind of holds that moment in time. And yeah, so hopefully if you are in the area, you can view the work, because I do believe that in viewing it, you complete the installation with your organic presence in the space, and that you get the chance to smell the faint scent of decomposition or fermentation from the kombucha and other materials that are in the installation, to see the stains and residues that are left on the table, to think about, you know, our trace and our lasting presence even after we have left our environment. So yeah, what will you bring into the space, and what are you taking with you? And that's all that I have.
Oh, wow. That's wonderful. Obviously we will break out into, if you have questions or anything. I mean, if you just want to shoot it into, I mean, you can always bring up your screen and show your face if you like. We encourage that. But if you just want to post your question into the chat, we can do it that way as well. I just do want to say, with the resin cast pieces where you have the fermentation of these different elements, I was so surprised, and I don't know why, but I just really thought casting something in resin would make it kind of sealed off, that it went off gas basically. And I've been pleasantly surprised, where I will walk by this show and I will capture, I'm like, sometimes sweet, sometimes really pungent, just these different levels of decay. And it just kind of hits you when you're walking past it. And I thought that was something really that I had taken for granted, with this idea of like sealing it in a tomb or something would in effect cut it off from having its own experience that it would naturally.
Yeah, I was really excited about that, because the rotting produce was so wet that it changed the composition of the resin. It should be hard, but it added another element of liquid, so it didn't cure in the way that it should, but it's still solid. You touch it and there's no residue, nothing, but it was really exciting that it was still giving off a scent, and it was leaking, it was porous, which I started to think about, yeah, our relationship to it, our, porous bodily container, and it's not as solid as we might think it is.
Because there's also another element in here that and I actually did make Chantel turn it off, so to speak, because it actually has quite a bit of sound. Is there's a water piece, so there's a pump in that 5-gallon pail that like pumps up through a tube into this bowl, this resin bowl that she has made, that actually has remnants of just like scrap and like dirt, and so the idea is that it goes into this, like, it's almost like a sink, because then it fountains down, and so you have this waterworks sound the whole. So I have Grottesque, and then I have the water. It's been a lovely combination between the two shows. So I think I was curious about when you were including that, because in this time of cycle and talking about trace and elements, and I wonder if you could talk a bit about the water as an inclusion in that.
Yeah, I was thinking about the water as something that was kind of continuous. There's all these things that, I mean, they are transforming, but at a rate that you look at it and it's not happening in front of your eyes. And so I kind of wanted another element that was changing rapidly and was continuing this cycle. But also something we talked about was that it's so arid here that the water is evaporating, and it isn't this continuous cycle. It is also in this state of entropy like everything else on the table. So it was exciting too that you had to tend to it and care for it in the same way that I was thinking about care and tending for our bodies and our spaces through the foods we eat, these kitchen scraps we throw away, or cleaning up the, crumbs off the floor and all these other things, tending to our environment. And then it was also, I really wanted some element of sound that I felt like would kind of complete the installation and ground you a little bit more within the space. So there's a few things I was thinking about.
There is a question here from Connie Chappell. So do you have any images of the changes of the inside out cylinders?
Yeah, I do. So because it was so rapid, when I was pouring them, it was like -40 and it was freezing instantly, which is how it got such interesting formations. But then it like heated up so quickly right after that. So it melted so quickly. So I do have a few photos and I can share them maybe with Amber. I'll find a way to share them. I can upload them to my website as well. I should do that. But yeah, I have only a few a few moments of those transformations because it was happening so
Well, it was unreal. Like when Chantel put them outside, we hit the coldest. I think it was like -50. So, like her and her poor family are out trying to work with this like water and ice, and it's so, so, so very cold. And then we went into like an unbelievable, we had like this really warm, glorious, and it just was like, we had a day where it went up to like +2 or something, like 2 weeks later. So it was like this work had this micro window, which this is part of working with that medium outdoors, but that was a real a challenge with that work because it was like, now you see it, now you don't. But it was an interesting thing to see.
Yeah.
I think to you, it's like, I asked this question of Bev and I will ask it of you. So what are you thinking? What are the next steps in your practice? What are you looking forward to working on next?
So currently I've been working on something very similar to this, but mostly with sound, and recording some of these materials and these like micro sounds that they're making and amplifying those in a space. So kind of an ASMR inspired type video that I've been thinking about, and working on some other drawings that I've been continuing. And then I'm really excited. I'm going to be working on a project called Between Us with the Art Gallery of Regina and Aganitha Dick to develop some interspecies collaboration works. So that's the next big thing that I'm excited for.
That's amazing. Well, I would just throw it out there to everyone in case you're being shy. If you do have a question, please feel free to just pop up, or if you have any questions. I mean, if you think of it later, obviously you can always get in touch with these two. Like both of these artists have like websites. They have a great presence online. Were there any other questions? It's like so hard to get. It's so hard to gauge with Zoom. Well, I think at this point, unless you guys maybe have some questions for each other, because I mean, that's also hard when you're both presenting, right? To think of these things. I don't know if you had questions, Chantal, for Bev, or Bev, you have questions for Chantal?
Well, we got to chat before we started the Zoom, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah, we got to cheat. We got to cheat. We got to have like some really great, wonderful tips from Bev, which no, I'm not sharing. We get to have the inside scoop. One of them was, I will share this, that pink does make people happy, and it also just does make your skin like glowing and like I'm in the pink room and I'm like, oh, looking at this mirror, looking into this mirror for an hour, I was like, oh, my skin looks wonderful. So if there isn't any other questions, I suppose that this kind of concludes. Both of these exhibitions are up until June 11th. So if you happen to be in Estevan or in the Southeast, we are open. We just ask that you come in. There is hand sanitizer. You can wear a mask. Well, you can't, you actually have to wear a mask. I shouldn't phrase it like that. But both of these works are accessible. You can come in and experience them in person. We'll have this online. I do encourage you to come and see the works if you can, because it's such a different experience seeing both of them in person. But I just want to thank every single person that came on tonight and supported these amazing artists and their work. I'm so very fortunate to be able to have both of your exhibitions in my institution. So thank you, everyone, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.